G'day.
G'day! Now a big welcome back to the channel, anyone who's been here before, and a huge welcome to anyone who's joining us for the first time. Now for anyone who caught our WA road trip series wrap-up segment in our last video, you'll know we decided to keep it a little bit of a secret as to our next destination, but we are here officially on our long weekend trip. But before the big reveal, I want to know who had a guess at what our Victorian coastal destination was going to be, and drop a comment below if you were able to pick it. So we are only an hour's drive southeast of Melbourne here on the Mornington Peninsula, and it's a stunning blend of seaside charm and world-class wine country, so of course it was fairly high on my list of places to visit. Now most people come here for the golden beaches and the vineyard-dotted hills, but beneath the surface of this holiday hotspot lies a much deeper, more rugged story. There's an incredible layer of history just waiting to be uncovered, and the best part is this area is so compact, so everything's within a fairly easy driving distance. So we're pretty confident that we're going to be able to fit a fair bit into this weekend. So grab yourself a coffee, get comfortable as we take you along to some of the best that the Mornington Peninsula has to offer. So our first stop here on the Mornington Peninsula is Point Nepean National Park, which is located right at the tip of the peninsula and has some outstanding coastal scenery and panoramic views of Port Phillip behind me, but also the Bass Strait. Now, Point Nepean is one of Victoria's most unique heritage sites, boasting a fascinating collection of historic buildings and structures. Now, our first stop here at the National Park is the Point Nepean Quarantine Station, which was established in 1852. Now imagine, you've been sailing in a cramped wooden boat for 90 days or more. You've sailed halfway across the world and you finally see the Australian coastline and you think paradise at last, only to see that dreaded yellow flag go up. Now the yellow flag was for centuries a universal symbol indicating that a ship might be carrying a contagious disease and needed quarantine. And this was the experience for many arriving by boat to Australia in the 1850s. Now within a year of gold being discovered in Victoria, nearly 100,000 people had arrived in Melbourne by sea. Now the cramped, unsanitary conditions of these migrant vessels meant that contagious diseases such as cholera, typhoid, smallpox and measles were rife. Point Nepean's location here at the entrance to Port Phillip Bay made it an ideal place for a quarantine station. So the new Victorian government in 1852 allocated a lump sum of £5,000, somewhere in the realm of 1.5 million in today's money, for the erection of a sanatorium, and the establishment of the quarantine station was set in motion, albeit very slowly. Now it was to be the arrival of a ship, the Ticonderoga, in around November 1852, so later that same year, that would finally expedite the process of the establishment and construction of the quarantine station. The ship had only left Liverpool about 3 months earlier with up to 700 healthy passengers and crew on board. By the time it reached Port Phillip Head here, there had been over 100 deaths recorded on board, mainly from typhus. Now, by the time the quarantine station processed the passengers and crew, over 400 were seriously ill with typhus, and later it was recorded that at least 70 passengers and crew went on to die here at the quarantine station.
So they weren't all that healthy when they left Liverpool, were they?
Obviously, there would have been one patient zero that came on unwell, and of course it spread due to the cramped conditions of the ships back then. So when a ship would arrive at Port Phillip Bay, a medical officer and pilot from Queenscliff would go aboard and assess the health of the ship essentially. And then if there was any sick passengers or disease recognised, then the yellow flag would go up, indicating that there was a contagious disease on board, and the ship would then be quarantined. Now, unfortunately, the jetty has long gone.
No, it's still there. So they're just,
apart from one lonely little pylon, but this is where it would be, and then basically behind us is the quarantine station. So we'll take you over to the passenger waiting room.
Change of plan. We've tried to get into the passenger waiting area, but it's all locked up. Michelle's just trying to break and enter. Anything in there?
No, it actually looks very derelict. Anyway.
Moving on.
So the quarantine station saw around 97,000 immigrants pass through its doors between 1852 and 1900. So when the passengers disembarked from their quarantine ships, they were then cleaned in the disinfecting house behind us, and their luggage and possessions were disinfected, and anything that couldn't be disinfected was basically burnt and destroyed.
So they had to work out how they cleaned the luggage and letters and goods that come through the quarantine station. So they had a couple of these bad boy chambers. One of them was steam, one of them was formaldehyde cleaning. We're not sure which way around they are. The signs aren't entirely clear, but yeah. Put the luggage through on the trolleys, come in here, seal it up. I guess formaldehyde the hell out of them for about 30 minutes, and then open it up and let them roll through. They also went through and took out valuables and put them in little white bags, and then pushed them through as well on different trolleys. So yeah, pretty interesting. Not sure why they didn't reopen this when COVID fired up back in 2020. So could have saved a bit of money if we just turned this back on. So we're at the quarantine station still, hospital area. Probably won't be able to use this footage because of music in the background, but holy shiz, there's some parties going on in this area. I don't
kind of ruins the historic old-timey vibe though, to have like modern day music blaring in the background.
I don't think these portaloos were here back in the 1800s. These look pretty modern.
Now behind me is Shepherd's Hut, which is the earliest surviving building here on the quarantine station, and is in fact one of the earliest intact limestone buildings in Victoria as a whole. Now the hut was owned by a man called Daniel Sullivan, who vacated the land when the quarantine station took over. Now its cellar dates back to 1845, but Daniel Sullivan's original hut was actually made of stone. This limestone building behind me was constructed in the 1850s. In 1912 saw the single largest occupation of the quarantine station, when almost 1,300 passengers from the ship the Irishman docked here, with majority of those people being housed here in Hospital 3, which was one of, we believe, at least 5 hospitals that were constructed here on the quarantine station in the late 1850s. In 1919, the biggest extended use of the quarantine station occurred with the dreaded influenza pandemic, which saw at least 12,000 Australians die and millions worldwide.
We find ourselves at the morgue in the isolation area of the camp. It was built way into the 1900s. It was way after this place was established. So not sure what they did with the bodies until this time, but they added this bad boy later on. We can't get in and have a look around, unfortunately. We'll have a look around the outside. So Australia's answer to the Berlin Wall. This right here. Colorbond fence. Well, it wasn't really colorbond, it was just a corrugated iron fence they put up in, do you know what year it was, Shell?
I think 1890.
1890 they put this fence up to keep the healthy people away from the unhealthy people. I don't know why you'd need a fence to do that, but anyway, they did, went all the way around. They knocked this fence down at some point, but they decided to keep this small section here because reasons. Good. Be good to have some more explanation about a lot of things, but we'll just have to make them up.
Well, I think it's pretty safe to say that they've kept it as a example of what went all around the isolation hospital, which you can see there in the background to the right.
But they've knocked down the incineration hut where they used to burn the body. And yes, and then in here we've got the original hospital. They've got all the market equipment where they put the gazebos and seats and I tell you what, this place real authentically historic. Well done. National Parks, Victoria. Good work.
Now might be a really good time for you to get angry.
That's my secret, Cat. I'm always angry.
Now, these 12 small timber huts were rapidly constructed in the face of the worldwide Spanish flu pandemic. And over 120,000 people, most of whom were ex-servicemen returning from overseas duty, were interned and examined here. Most of which contracted Spanish flu, which had started in the United States and spread rapidly. In the end, they estimate that about 60 million people worldwide died of Spanish flu, and as I said before, about 12,000 in Australia alone. Now, right at the tippity-tip of the Mornington Peninsula is Fort Nepean, which is a former defensive facility. And it formed part of a critical network of fortifications and defences, which protected the narrow entrance to Port Phillip from the 1870s through to 1945. Now, the use of Port Nepean for defensive purposes, as I said, commenced in the 1870s. Now, fortifications and barracks were built around 1873, and gun batteries or emplacements, is that what they were called? Up to 6 were constructed and installed around 1886, which meant that by 1890, Melbourne was considered the best defended commercial city of the entire British Empire, and its port the most heavily fortified port in the whole of the Southern Hemisphere. So here at Fort Nepean, you can explore the extensive tunnel complexes, the forts themselves, and the gun emplacements. And we'd recommend leaving at least 45 minutes to an hour to really sink your teeth into all the history that's here. All right, here we go. We're at gun emplacement 5 in the tunnels. Now, these underground passages access magazine compartments where shells and fuses and such were stored. So this was a pulley lift, which was used for raising the ammunitions up to ground level. Wow. Now, interestingly, the first shot of the British Empire in World War I was from this gun emplacement 6, from what we believe was a 6-inch Mark 7 gun. Now, they fired on a German steamer that was trying to leave Port Phillip shortly after the declaration of war. Now, Fort Nepean is also said to have fired the first Australian shots of World War II when a warning shot was fired at an unidentified vessel which ended up being a Bass Strait freighter on the 4th of September 1939. Now, unfortunately, the freighter failed to identify herself as she entered the heads, but luckily it was only a warning shot.
There is a heap of these little cupboards. Obviously there used to be a door. You can see the hinge spots and the little lock hole. What do you reckon they used to store in there?
Equipment magazine.
Spare parts. There you go. That
There we
one.
go.
That
We
one
answered our
helps.
own question.
Well, that one's for spare parts. Disappearing gun. That's it hidden. That's it when it's erect. Pretty cool. The gun used to sit on those hooks there and it used to lift up. They'd shoot it and the recoil used to flop the gun back down here underground. And that's where they would swab it out, clean it out, reload it, and then lift it back up. Always broken, always broke down. Everyone hated using it, but one of two remaining in Australia. This is the bomb-proof room. The brick walls are covered by 4 foot or 1.2 metre thick mass concrete roof. 2 battery observation posts were built above. What happens if we just hit it there? How handy's the shuttle bus been today?
Very handy.
Pretty good. You can't drive up the end. You can only drive, you can drive into the quarantine station and then a little bit further up into, what's it called? Gunner's Cottage. And then from Gunner's Cottage, you've got to park your car and then jump on the shuttle bus. Or you can walk. Wouldn't recommend, or ride a bike. I'd probably suggest that if you had an e-bike, but holy moly, there are some hills coming in and out of here.
So you can hire bikes at the quarantine station.
You could, not today, you couldn't. Today is a Saturday and it's unmanned and you couldn't hire them, so don't rely on that. Pre-book it or ring up and double check before you turn up. Shuttle bus, you jump on, you try and pay Steve with your coins that you had in your pocket, $12 for an adult or $8 for a concession, and Steve goes, no way, Jose, give us that credit card only. So just be aware, make sure you got your card on you, don't worry about cash, they don't like that. But anyway, every 45 minutes or probably every half an hour, the bus does a loop and stops and starts along the way. Very handy. We're about to jump on it and head back towards our car.
I think if you were going to walk, I think from the quarantine station here to Fort Nepean, which is the furthest you can walk, it's about 5k's one way. So you definitely want to be fit and have comfortable walking shoes on.
It is not flat, it is up and down.
It is super, super hilly.
And it's a single lane road and you've got to share it with a bus. There's no designated walking trail, you are on the road with the bus. So just be careful.
But the bus does run every day of the year except for Christmas Day.
Well, Steve wants a day off, does he?
Super handy, yeah. Well, I mean, he also takes a lunch break for an hour.
Don't try and come back at 12:30. There is no shuttle at that half hour.
Yeah.
Steve's parked up having his sangers, so yeah.
We actually don't know if his name's Steve. It's just
I've been calling him Steve, and he's been responding to Steve.
What a beautiful sandy beach to go. No, it's not. It's garbage. Why would you go swimming off here?
Now, it was here on Cheviot Beach on the 17th of December 1967 that Australia's 18th Prime Minister, Mr. Harold Holt, waded into the churning surf and subsequently disappeared under the turbulent water. Now, the disappearance of a sitting Prime Minister during the Cold War, no less, would inevitably become etched in the nation's consciousness. Now, of course, a massive search and rescue operation was undertaken, but unfortunately it was marred by absolutely horrendous conditions, which left the job of finding the Prime Minister akin to searching for a needle in a haystack.
Dozens of police, search and rescue squads and divers have been rushed to the area and have been searching since 2 o'clock. Light craft have been braving the heavy seas near Portsea, and several aircraft have been in the air constantly. Officials say the sea search is hampered by heavy rolling seas.
We're over the area of the back beach at Point Lonsdale, about 70 miles from Melbourne. The Port Phillip pilot boat, the Rip, is patrolling about half a mile further out, outside the breakers. The tide is almost out now, but even so, the waves are 6 to 8 feet high. Outside the breaker line, the water drops sharply to a depth of about 60 feet. One small rescue boat has overturned. There it is, just in the waves, crashing over it, and we've just heard on the pilot's radio that the occupants were rescued. Complete darkness has now settled on the Cheviot Beach at Portsea, about 2.5 miles from the township proper, and the search that began today at about 20 to 1 has now been officially called off until dawn tomorrow. These 7 men are members of the No. 1 Flotilla, Australian Coast Guard, the diving section. What kind of water was it at that stage?
Very rough, milky. It was like being inside a washing machine.
You fellows know water very well, living so much underneath it. What chance would you say anybody would have, or for that matter now, of a body being found in the area?
At the moment, none at all.
And despite the massive search that went on for almost 3 weeks, his body was never found, meaning that only 2 days later, on the 19th of December 1967, Harold Holt was pronounced dead. Now, in September 2005, almost 38 years after his disappearance, the Victorian State Coroner issued a finding that Harold Holt drowned while swimming. Now, at the time of his disappearance, the Coroner's Act of 1958, I believe, meant that coroners could not investigate the death of somebody unless a body was discovered, hence the delay in the finding. Now, the failure to find his body has fueled conspiracy theories for decades. People are just sceptical that an Australian Prime Minister could simply vanish without a trace, particularly in an era that was defined by geopolitical tensions. Now, these conspiracy theories include that he may have been the victim of an assassination plot, or that he was abducted by a Chinese submarine. Now, the salty reality of the situation, though, is rather more mundane and probably less thrilling. The conditions on the day where Harold Holt went out into the water were particularly bad. There were really rough seas and surf. There was strong westerly winds with gusts of up to 50 to 60 kilometres per hour, and those types of conditions would often create a bit of a tide, a rip tide, here at Cheviot Beach. So really horrible conditions to be swimming in, and there is a theory that his efforts to swim would have been further marred by the fact that he had had an ongoing shoulder ailment, which potentially would have further hampered his ability to swim against these conditions. The unfortunate reality being that Harold Holt, despite being an incredibly confident swimmer, just really misjudged the conditions on the day and unfortunately drowned in those terrible conditions on what would have otherwise been a fairly ordinary Sunday afternoon. Now, in 1969, a plaque commemorating Harold Holt was bolted to the sea floor here off Cheviot Beach, and it bears the inscription, "In memory of Harold Holt, Prime Minister of Australia, who loved the sea and disappeared hereabouts on the 17th of December 1967. All right, so we're back at the van now. Massive day today out at Point Nepean National Park. How many hours did we spend out that way in the end? About 5 hours?
58, I think it was in total today.
So yeah, we're nice and tired, we're a bit pooped. So easy dinner tonight comes courtesy of Harry from his second book, Fire to Fork. We're gonna have a go at the satay skewers, the fast option. So I've gone ahead and I've cut up my roughly 600 grams of chicken breast fillet into 2cm chunks, and we're going to let that marinate now with a tablespoon and a half of curry, a teaspoon of sugar, and about a teaspoon of salt, and 2 tablespoons of cooking oil. So you want to combine those ingredients really well, make sure that you're completely coating your chicken. Harry says to leave this for at least 20 minutes, but you can go ahead and leave it overnight. We're going to leave it probably a good hour or so while we just kick back and have a little bit of a drink, and I'll be back shortly to make the satay sauce. All right, I'm back. We're going to make the satay sauce, which requires you to heat up 2 tablespoons of cooking oil in your pan, which I've been doing. And then to that, you're going to add 2 tablespoons of your red curry paste. So you basically want to fry off that red curry paste until it begins to separate. And then to that, you want to add about a cup or one of these little 270ml coconut milks. And then half a cup of peanut butter, 2 teaspoons of sugar, and 1 teaspoon of fish sauce. And then you want to bring everything to a slow boil. Now we can let this just sit, and then we'll heat it up right before we need to serve it.
So we've got the Weber up to high heat, only needs to be medium, but this bad boy doesn't get too hot. Put these on, turn them every 5 minutes until cooked through.
Bon appetit!
Cape Schanck Lighthouse has been ensuring the safe passage of ships since 1859.
Shank or Schnack? Because Schnacky Schnack sounds way cooler than Shank.
I'm fairly certain it's Schanck.
Cape Schnack? We'll go with Schnack.
I'm running with Schanck.
Okay.
Comment below which one's correct.
Oh, I know which one's correct, but I know which one's more fun. Schnacky Schnack.
It was the second coastal lighthouse to be established in Victoria, with Cape Otway widely recognised as the oldest lighthouse, not only in the state, but in Australia as a whole. Now, the Cape Schanck Lighthouse Precinct includes the heritage listed lighthouse there, a museum that's in the old assistants quarters, and the lighthouse keeper's residence, which I believe you can pay to stay in. Now, the lighthouse was constructed, as I said, in 1859 from limestone, and it stands at 21 metres. So it's a fair cry from the largest lighthouse, which is Cape Wickham over in Tasmania, but it's also nowhere near the shortest in Australia, with that badge of honour belonging to a little 7-metre lighthouse in South Australia, and I've forgotten the name of that lighthouse. So Cape Schanck Lighthouse is part of a triangle of Bass Strait lights, with the other lighthouses being Cape Otway, as I spoke about, and Cape Wickham.
Always reading, always reading.
I believe that you can actually pay to stay at the lighthouse keeper's residence.
I reckon that's it over there.
I don't know how comfortable it would be.
You have to cut your own firewood, do you?
Fun fact about the lighthouse, it was the first lighthouse in Australia to have a stone staircase. So up until then, and what's more popular, I suppose, or common, is the iron staircases, but that one has a stone staircase. You can pay for tours up there. I think it's $17 an adult. We're a bit too stingy to pay for it. Okay, we're back on the road, having visited Cape Schanck. Now, unfortunately, it really hadn't opened yet, had it?
Plenty of people around.
They were going to be running tours today, every hour between about 11 and 3. And yeah, the first one didn't run to 11, so it's only 10:30 now. So even if we had hung around, the museum that I spoke of wasn't open today, and it looks like it's been closed for a little bit.
Closed for heritage works.
So yeah, we'll see you at Other Sea. Alright, so we just stopped for a coffee and gazed out at the lookout here at Arthur's Seat. Now there is the gondolas, cable cars that you can take from the base station, which is located in Dramana, all the way up here to the top of the summit. It takes about 15 minutes each way, so a 30-minute round trip. And Ben's too stingy to pay for it, hence why we've driven to the top. So for a one-way ticket for an adult, I think is about $24.50, and for a return ticket for an adult is $32.50.
Well, I've just done the maths with the current fuel prices. It's probably about the same, so...
I would say so. We've just stopped off at the bath boxes or boat sheds on Dramana Beach. They can also be found at Mount Martha, and they've become a bit of an iconic structure here on the Mornington Peninsula. Now Ben, how much do you think a bath box goes for on Dramana Beach nowadays?
Well, I would guess something crazy like $300,000, because when I was looking at them, they were only about 6 meters by 3 meters. They were kind of the size of a single car garage back from the 80s that you used to see beside houses.
Yep, and you'd be amazed, but Ben is pretty well right on the money. So a quick Google search tells us that they can sell for anywhere from $170,000 through to $450,000. Now, of course, it depends really on their location, their locality to amenities such as toilets and cafes, and it'll also depend on their size and whether or not they've got power. But yeah, somewhere in that range is what you're looking to pay for a bath box there. So
hectic.
I don't want to even think about what the houses cost here.
Yeah, that's right.
That hurts a lot. That makes me sad. Now on top of that, you are paying a annual fee to keep your box.
Like rates to the council?
I believe so, yeah. And of course you're paying a little bit more if you've got a powered box versus an unpowered box. But I think the annual fees are somewhere around $600 on average. So pretty expensive little investment there on the beach. But I dare say a good investment. You'd imagine that they're only going to go up in value.
So there's nothing actually here. This was the first settlement, but there's no physical things.
We've just stopped off at the 1803 Collins settlement site, which was the first European attempt to settle in Victoria. So of course, the first fleet had landed in Sydney and set up settlement there in 1788. But the concern was that the repeated arrival of convicts into that area was starting to affect the morality of the area there in Sydney, and so it was proposed that they consider sending convicts elsewhere. Furthermore, they were worried about French settlement here on Australian soil, and so for those two reasons the decision was made to send folks here to settle. So they took off in two ships, the Ocean and the Calcutta, led by a Lieutenant Colonel David Collins. Now along with Collins were at least 300 convicts and 40 odd family members of those convicts, as well as some free settlers, and here they landed in November of 1803.
All right.
I think, yeah. But unfortunately, it was a complete and utter failure. So much so that by May of the following year, 1804, they had all up and transferred over to Van Diemen's Land in Tasmania. The failure was due to the fact that they found that the soil here was not very fertile, making it incredibly difficult to grow crops, and sources of fresh water were fairly scarce. Unfortunately, because of how long ago the settlement was here and the short amount of time that it was here for, there is actually very limited physical evidence of the settlement site. But we are going to head down to some remains of some graves. But there is one interesting story to come out of the settlement, and that was the escape attempt of up to 11 convicts. Now again, that was also mostly a failure, with at least 4 convicts being recaptured and up to 6 presumed to have perished. But 1 convict managed to escape and remained at large for at least 32 years, and that was William Buckley. Now, he lived with the Indigenous community that was here, and he only made himself known in about July of, what would that make it, 1835? When he met up with a bunch of explorers and decided that he would return to European society. But I believe he had some trouble because he had spent so much time with the Indigenous people here that he found himself stuck between 2 different cultures. And
Neither of them trusted him.
But pretty much, yeah. So he had a little bit of a difficult time thereafter. But yeah, let's head on to the remains of the gravesite here.
Yeah.
So there were a total of 19 deaths in the time that the settlement was here, 15 of those being convicts. And they obviously know the location of the grave sites, and I think they're probably assuming that this would have been close to where the settlement was.
So is this the grave sites or not?
Certainly looks that way. There's nothing on the information board though.
Be handy to know.
But I'm running off information that's on the big memorial can at the front of the area here.
It's probably a 2-drink walk from the van to the beach.
A 2-drink walk.
He's going to come and get the seagulls. Yep, get them. Go on.
It's on a mission.
Had no chance. Those seagulls were
Look at his
very
slow run, poor little thing.
No, the old fella, I think.
He is old.